you know, I cut this out because I was going too long, but these are kind of like civic parables, right? Like in church there are parables, like the Good Samaritan story. We need to learn how to tell civic parables. And you know, all parables, the beauty of parables is there's a lesson embedded in it. They're simple, they're made to be shareable, and they implicate the listener that you are part of this and you can do this yourself. Maybe not with us, but maybe with someone else. So you need to tell that story.
Hi, thank you for being here today. My name is Lorraine, I'm with Midwest Family, and I think that Michigan's Great Southwest is an absolute gem. We are blessed to be here. We have amazing people, we have amazing organizations, we do a lot of good, and your conversation today shines a light on the fact that there are so many pockets of good stories that maybe we aren't telling, but I want to know what's the next step, because we have a lot of wonderful people in this room that have huge hearts they want to serve. What do we do next?
In terms of your own work?
In terms of us together really making that difference in the community for hope and healing. You said without the word collaboration, but how do we come together? What's the next step for us to take this challenge that you're offering us and turning it into a reality?
Yeah, so I think, you know, look, we have 4 mantras in our work. One is start small to go big. And so I think, and it might be you, right? We need someone catalytic to start to pull some like-minded folks together and start a conversation about how we can work even better together, how we can, together, maybe lift up some of these stories, how we can ensure that we have the knowledge about the community that we need so that we're really clear about where the community is or the people we're trying to work with. And that's where I would start. I would take those steps. They're all doable. You can get started. What's today? Wednesday? You can get started next week. And the United Way has some stuff they probably could share with you that could help you do some of that. But I would start small and just get things moving. And that's the best way to get it going.
Hi. I heard you mention something earlier in regards to Christians and churches. I want to know, have you done any work with the Christians as a whole or group in regards to the division and the lack of unity in being together and dealing with a lot of the racism, the political stuff that's going on in any way? I guess I'm wondering, are Christians involved in any way? I hear so many things in regards to Christian evangelicals and a lot of negativity. Is there something going on that I don't know about?
Yeah, well, you know, on our website there's a report called One Step at a Time, which you can download for free. It's from Clark County. And if you also download Waving the Community's Flag, which was the first report we did, One Step at a Time was a follow-up, you'll see in the first report it said that one of the biggest problems in Clark County were religious leaders. There were more churches than you could stick a stick at. They were all competing with each other theologically. They were all competing with each other to put people in seats on Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings. And they were dividing the community by the ways in which they were engaging. So one of my first stops in Clark County when we released this report was to meet with 20 religious leaders behind a closed door. And where I said to them, I hate to tell you this, but what people are telling you is you're part of the problem here in Clark County. And of course you can imagine they didn't like that. And they started quoting scripture to me. And I started quoting scripture back to them. And we held the Public Innovators Lab, which is how we train people in our work. So you can always go to one of our virtual Public Innovator Labs. The next one's in March. And we invited them, and 7 of them showed up. And lo and behold, the local Y had to close, and 400 kids were out playing ball and adult supervision. They're just back on the street. So 5 of these churches decided to get together and said, this is our chance. So they got together and they created a new sports league. They all had gyms. So they started to hold the games in their gyms and on fields. And they had people go to other parts of town they had never been to, or parts of the county, so that we could start to engage with each other differently. And here's what happened. They didn't have 400 kids when they started, they had 800. A year later, they had over 1,000. 2 years later, they had over 2,000. They ran out of space. So another church raised their hand and said, one of the churches that didn't want to play at all, raised their hand and said, well, I've got a gymnasium, but it's in disrepair. It's going to cost me, I don't know what it is, like $40,000. I've got 25, but I can't find the other 15. All the other churches got together, passed the plate, and gave them the 15,000. Now, what's happening is, this is revitalizing relationships between these churches and the work that they're doing in the community. We're facing the same challenge right now in Alamance County, North Carolina.
Is this cross-cultural?
Cross-cultural, cross-race, cross-economics, cross-town, cross-county. And in Alamance County, North Carolina, which is kind of ground zero for, the old Confederacy and all sorts of issues, we believe that bringing the faith community together is going to be one of the ways in which we can actually create some trust and move things forward. So yes, in Flint, Michigan, we work with the faith community. So during 9/11, the group that stepped forward to bring people together across faiths, Jews, Muslims, Christians, different denominations within Christianity, was Woodside Church. That was the first one. And they were one of our public innovators. So they used our work to transform their church and to transform the work in the community. So it's possible. It's possible. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, Rich, my question would be, what suggestion would you have for leaders who are engaged in different communities where there can't even be a mutual agreement upon what the facts of the problems that people are actually facing in order to determine and decide what the best way forward is? How would you recommend working around just the right setting of, these are the right set of facts? Most importantly, when those facts become offensive to people who are direct, for lack of a better term, at the very minimum, accountable for the results of those facts, or complicit in allowing those facts to continue.
Yeah, well, that's pardon to any superintendent, well, that's a challenge we have with education all the time. We have that challenge with health providers, right, and health systems. So two quick thoughts come into mind. There's more than this, but one is I wouldn't start with the facts. I would start with people's shared aspirations for the community. We have a tool you can do. It's 3 questions called the Aspirations Exercise. It's also on our website. And I would bring people together to start with those 3 questions, because what we find is those 3 questions illuminate quickly, like in 45 minutes, what people share in common about the kind of community they want to seek to create. It creates a stronger foundation. And as talking about that and the implications of what people come up with, it creates, this is how we got to these equity agendas in Reading, Clarksville, and Lexington. It created a glide path into deeper conversations that need to happen, which we did have, but we had to start way back here to reset the table. That's one. 2, when I teach our work, I don't teach it very often anymore, but when I teach our work, I say, if you want to create hope, you have to be ruthlessly strategic. And one of the things you have to be really strategic about is who you're going to run with. And the reality is not everyone's ready to run. And I think for those of us, particularly in the helping, supporting, service industry sector, that's hard. Because we want everyone to come. And we want everyone to like each other, or at least agree on some stuff. And the reality, as you know, because you're pointing it out, is that ain't going to happen. So one of the things we advise folks is, who can you run with? This goes back to your question also. Who can you run with? And how do you get started with them? And my experience is the more we can get the chain reaction moving, not just talking, but moving. This is a problem in Alamance County. They're just talking. There's no action. If we can just get some stuff moving, get in motion, what I find over time, not immediately, but over time, is that we can, if you keep the room opener, like in the Bible, Abraham's tent, where all 4 sides of the tent are open, people will start to come in and they'll start to bring others with them over time. And I think that approach is much more pragmatic, it's much more doable, and we can get on the trajectory for hope faster. And that would be the other suggestion of that. Which means that the health groups or the educators, while you need them because they hold the key to some things, they may not come until later on. And that's been my experience. So, hope that helps. All right, thank you so much for having me.
Just a few words to wrap us up this morning. A few months ago, my pastor said something in her sermon that really hit home with me. She said, "Destruction is loud, so it gets people's attention. But what's quiet is growth. And it's so quiet that you don't even really know that it's happening until you take a step back and look at where you used to be compared to where you are now. And growth is what leads to hope. So our job as a community now after this message today is to make hope louder than destruction. And that's what has made it is so important for all of you to be here with us this morning. One last quote from the Civic Virus report. It says, "The findings in this report help point the way forward to a more hopeful society where people feel seen and heard and understood, where acceptance and belonging count, where empathy, productive talk, and compromise are possible, where shared action is taken to address common challenges." So each one of us in this room today have a role to play in making this happen. The question is, as Rich's parting words were, it's not time to surrender, it's time to step up. So how are we all going to step up? So there are 3 ways that you can stay connected to this work. Lorraine, you had a great question of, okay, so what now? Like, what do we really do? There's 3 things you can do. First, on your tables, there's little blue cards that have a QR code. You can scan that code and you can tell us what kind of community you want to live in. Second, you can stop by the Memory Fox booth and share a photo or a quick video about your thoughts on what you heard and what you learned today. Third, this has been recorded, and so an email will be sent to you in the coming days with the video of this presentation. If you want to know, okay, on behalf of myself or my organization, like we want to become one of these boundary-spanning organizations, or we want to continue with this work, respond to Heather when she sends that email and say, we're in. How do we move this forward together? And we'll start that conversation. It doesn't mean that all the work gets coordinated by United Way. That's not what this is about. It's just a way to stay connected and to learn how we can all start to figure out who we're going to run with and run with each other together. So I want to finish how I started with my 64 sticky notes from Rich's book, Stepping Forward. The 64th sticky note, so the very last one, said this: "If we are to improve our shared lives, then we must release ourselves from our resignation that things must be the way they are today. We can declare they can be better. We can be better. So let's use today as our jumping off point to be better together."